Welcome back to my channel, and we'll continue with the last instalment on the Junky. Now when we left the last time, these horrible decals from Roden, they just broken. So I decided I would mask up underneath because half of them had stuck, half of them hadn't, but I found a solution by using the Tamiya tape and then my little masking tool, which happens to be a corner of the cob holder. That pushed down the ridges, the corrugations, allowed me to get in with the paint and get a very crisp edge. A tiny bit of touch up, came up perfectly. And then I just masked in again, put the black in and solved the whole problem. Next put a gloss coat on and I started with those Eduard decals, decided to see if they worked, and they worked brilliantly. In fact, they worked so well that I'd used a little bit too much decal solution on one of them. I think it's in the right hand side there, and there's a little bit of bleeding of the purple sort of into the decal. But that all disappears later and I got it all together. But yes, the Roden decals, throw them in the bin. They're absolutely rubbish for this model. There's no way you get them for the corrugations. But the Eduard decals look perfect. And this is where we've got to. Well, it's been a little bit of skullduggery. A little bit of cock-uppery and then a little bit of savoury and fixery and usual Harry Houdini cocking it up and getting it right. It's sort of my method. Now, let me run you through what's happened. Well, the decals underneath, they've come up a treat, although you'll notice they're looking a little bit sort of white and gunky. That is an excess of a matte coat. And I'm yet to do the underside there, but I've fixed the top. What happened was, let me tell you a story. Getting ready to finish the video, I mean, it looked great, but it was too glossy. As you can see, the previous shots, I put a gloss coat on to see if those Eduard decals would adhere better with a gloss coat, and they do. Those Eduard decals went down beautifully. They conformed to the corrugations, no problems at all, fitted in nicely. But I got a little bit too carried away on the first one, and I put a little bit too much of the setting solution on after the experience of the Roden decals. I was sort of a bit paranoid and was slathering the stuff everywhere. Didn't really need it. I only needed to apply these Eduard decals exactly as you would any other decals. And you might be able to see if I tilt and catch the light. It is conforming to those corrugations beautifully. So when I did the other side, I didn't put as much setting solution on, just put what you'd normally put. And maybe you can see there. You can see every single corrugated ridge fits perfectly. So I wouldn't recommend the Rodent decals at all for this build. They are rubbish. I mean, you can mask up. I had some success masking there, and I mean, I had a lot of success masking underneath. The only thing that's wrong with that at the moment is an excess of clear finish. So let's talk about that. So what happened is this. I'd sealed in the bottom decals when I put the gloss coat on because I was so worried about bottom decals and the painting, the repairs. And they look fine. So they came up great. They're nicely sealed in. And I gloss coated everything, and I thought, you know, really, this plane could probably stay glossy because it really wouldn't have seen a lot of use at the end of the World War I. So, you know, it probably would have been fairly clean. But on reflection, after looking at it for a couple of days, I realised it really is too shiny, especially around the motor and things like that. It was just too shiny. So I decided, oh well, I'll just put a flat coat on, put a nice matte flat coat on. Now, I had forgotten to clean out my airbrush, my old Master G25 that I use for clear coats. I wouldn't use my old water for any of the varnishes. I'm paranoid of getting varnish sticking in the airbrush. Case in point, I didn't clean out completely. I must have had a phone call or got distracted or something. So I didn't clean the gloss varnish out completely out of the old Master. So when I went in to do the matte coat, started off okay, and then spit, spot, gunks, I ended up with bloody slathers, snotty layers all down this. Oops, what an almighty cock-up. But I knew that all you had to do was get a brush out, hairy brush, and wipe it smooth, try and get the worst off you can with a sort of a damp hairy brush, and then just wait. And that's what I did. I left it overnight. It's quite hot here. It all dried. So in the morning I got up. I didn't take any photos of this because I was so embarrassed, but I'll tell you the story because this is a way to solve a problem. So I thought I'll share this with you. So I got up in the morning and it's all white and streaky. In fact, the whole model looked very much like these decals. Big white streaks everywhere. You know, it really looked quite horrible. And they were mainly in the grooves because that's where the excess of the white matte coat white. Well, it's white when you put it on. It looks white, but it's supposed to, you know, it dries clear and matte. But if you've got too much of it, it becomes very opaque and you end up with little white runs. And that's what I had. I had white runs everywhere. There's even probably, there's a couple of tiny ones left there. I'll get them off yet. Now, the solution to this is very simple. Well, in the case of the brown here, all I did was I ran some accent panel line. I had a light brown here. I mean, you can make up any wash. Basically, an enamel wash, if you push it on, put it on quite thick and rub, it will rip off most clear coats, which is normally not a good thing. But in this case, it's what I wanted. At least it took off the excess. So that got into all the ridges along here and it tore away at it. It also created quite an interesting little weathered effect. I'm quite happy with that. That was quite serendipitous. That's kind of like my modelling. If you watch many of my videos, you'll know there's cock-ups and then there's solutions, and then often out of that come methods. This is how I sort of invent most of my modelling, by ballsing things up and then going, how am I going to fix this? And then the solution actually becomes a new method that I can then use to create effects. Well, in this case, the excess of the matte coat wiped off with the enamel wash, right? It actually gave me just the look I wanted. Dulled everything down, made it look a lot more realistic, and it roughed things up. It wasn't so perfect anymore because it kind of had stripped some paint, and it had done all the effects and it had achieved what I wanted. So then I used clear, and I'm just using the Tamiya products as I have them. You could use anything you like, really. Don't know if odorless thinners will do the same thing, but they might, you never know. All I can say is the Tamiya stuff will strip my life colour clear. I know that, and so I will not usually put them on if I'm going to put a wash coat, because I know it just disappears. But in this case, it's a way to save your model. So there you go, there's a solution to a problem. So anyhow, strip, and now you wouldn't know. I mean, that just looks pretty well as it did in those photos with the black background, but it's dulled now. It's much matte, more matte. Matte? You know Matt? Matt the flat coat, nice guy, yeah. Alright, well, I've got to do the underside yet. I'm just going to quickly put some on there, and you'll see how it removes straight away all the waxiness, and the problem just disappears in front of your eyes. Here's the problem, as you can probably see clearer now, but we're nice and close, just how streaky and waxy. In fact, it was worse on the top, believe me, it really was. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some enamel thinner. In this case it's just X20 from Tamiya, it's just what I have. You could probably use turpentine, you may be able to use white spirits, you may even be able to do this with odorless thinner, don't know. You'd have to try. You'd have to try and see if it does work. But this is my method using the materials that I have. Now I'll use an old brush that I've got. This is the one I kind of use for doing washes. It's a bit firm, right? It's not a really soft brush, and I don't know what the name is. There's a guy called Crispy Duck on one of the forums on Facebook. He knows what these things are called. He'll probably say, "Oh, that's a rapier." Don't know. It's just a brush. It's a stiffy little brush, and it's kind of got a point at the end there. And this works perfectly for when I'm doing washes, getting little grooves and things and rubbing through. And this is exactly what I need here, because I need a bit of purchase, because I've got to scrape literally that clear varnish off, which is like a wax. In fact, it's produced like a waxy result. All right. Now, normally you'd probably decant this and put it in a little container or something. I don't need to. I've only got a skerrick in the bottom of this, There's a 15th left. So enough on my brush so it is wet but not dripping. And then what I'm going to do is try not to wreck the whole model. Can you see that? Okay. Now, it looks wonderful straight up, but what you also have to do then is start removing the wax. Wow, the clear matte. I call it wax, but it's almost like a wax really. And that's all I do, is I just use, the brush is stiff enough that it is pulling it off, but it's not too dangerous and too sort of damaging that it's going to rip off, because this side is a decal, that side is hand painted. Okay, you've got two different mediums here. On the top surface it was all decals, and I had to be very careful around them, because obviously when you're putting thinner on top of decals there could be a lot of crying. Alright, so that is pretty well it. It's just about there. It really doesn't take much. So the trick is to keep stroking and you're ripping it off. And when eventually there's no thinner left, that should be done. And then you wait for it to dry, and you may need to go and do this twice. It may need a touch up, but it really is that easy. You might be able to see in here there's build up of the clear coat, and it's all white in there. So similarly, we would now remember I've got my colour underneath is life colour. Well, actually, it's got Steiner Res, which has really locked everything down. And then I've got some life colour that I use to touch it up with. And that's how I got the this sort of light Germany bluey-green colour. Alright, so now that I've got it on there and I've worked it, now you remove it. And that's my method, that's my technique, and it does work. It'll save your buns when you have gone, oh no, I've stuffed up the clear coat. Because I mean, the clear coat's not exactly something you can sand off. Usually it's the last thing you do, and that's that's where you're basically calling it quits for your model, and it's the time you really don't want an almighty balls up. Alright, well I'll keep going with this because you don't really need to see me sort of get through all that, but that's the technique, and even though that's starting to dry, it's not too bad. There's a little bit of touching up required there, and that's all you do is you just then see where you've missed, and basically just go in with a semi-damp brush. You won't need to add heaps more. Don't double dip. Like once you've put it on thick and that's what you're wiping off, don't go again because that could really rip everything off. That's been my experience. You're basically just using a damp brush and you're just trying to remove it. But there you go. There's a little technique that I figured out because I've done this before. Alright, come back in a sec and I'll show you the finished model. Now, one of the other things with World War I aircraft is rigging. They've usually got lots of rigging, but one, this is a monoplane. Two, it's all metal, and it didn't even have the rigging for the ailerons and the rudders. There was basically no cables, although essentially rigging cables are metal, aren't they? But you get what I mean. There's nothing external in rigging except for a cross brace here on the undercarriage, because for some reason they still kind of hadn't figured out how to do individual wheels. Well, they didn't have little pop-up wheels yet, did they? Pop-up wheels? Whatever. Okay, you're waffling, Harry D. Essentially, World War I planes have rigging, but this doesn't, except for a cross brace down here in the undercarriage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some Easy Line. Now, if you've never seen this stuff before, it has some magical properties. So let me show you what I've done here, because I've prepared a little experiment, a bit like Julius Sumner Miller. I don't know if you Australians get that. Why is it so? Okay, what I've done is I've shaved a bit of spare sprue here till it's really thin, so that bends quite easily, right? Now I've got the Easy Line on there like you'd attach any rigging, and I've just put a tiny bit of CA glue to hold in place. Now, watch what happens when I pull the Easy Line. And I can pull and pull and pull and pull and pull, and I'm pulling like crazy here, right? I pulled out at least a foot, 30 centimetres. Nothing happened to that bit of sprue. And this is the beauty of this stuff. It doesn't add any tensile strength to your model. It's also failing if you want to put rigging on because that's what you want so that your model's stronger. So, usually you'll rig up the wings in reality, that the rigging's there so everything holds in place and it gives some rigidity to the design. Well, that won't work with Easy Line. So if you've built a model and it's wobbly and you put this Easy Line on rigging in the hope of tying it all together, it doesn't work. But if your model is fairly well cemented together and all you really need is the rigging on it to look nice because you're doing it for effect, Easy Line is fantastic because all you've got to do is attach it to one point, drag it and get the tension, and then basically rest it on the next point, tiny bit of CA glue, leave it for a few minutes, and then trim it away. And it's as easy as that. In fact, it's so easy, I'm going to show you now by rigging that simple cross brace on the undercarriage. Oh no! Unfortunately, while doing the close-ups with the iPad, I bumped it, it slipped, fell straight in the model and smashed it to pieces. Yeah. These are some photos that I took when I had the gloss coat on, which is all we've got at the moment to have a look at how she was. Look, I think it's savable. It broke into pretty individual pieces. It's nothing shattered, everything's just broken on seam lines. So I'll try and prepare that and we'll come back later, but for now it's hooroo from Australia.